question, and the origin question of a documentary is always fun and interesting. Sometimes you look for something and you can't find it, or sometimes you find it, sometimes it finds you. And in this case, I have a double career. I'm also a visual artist. And Martina is an art collector who bought my work. And I met her at an opening, and she'd seen some of my other films. And she said, listen, there's an artist I really want to show you. I have some of his work. I think you'd find it interesting. I didn't know her, and I didn't know about her history. And we agreed to meet, and when I went to Greenpoint, which you saw in the film, I was startled because there were hundreds of Roy's works, incredibly charged, incredibly sexual, graphic, violent, and it just so caught me off guard. But I also had one of those filmmaker moments. The light switch just went on, and I felt something rumbling underneath. I knew there was some connection between Martina and this work, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was there. She was a very controlling, withholding person, as you can see in times in the film. But I suspected there was a relationship and a symmetry, so she wanted me to make a film, I suppose, about Roy, perhaps, maybe, I don't know. He's a very compelling character, but I said, I'm really interested in Roy, but I'm also interested in you, and why you're interested in Roy. And I think in Martina's mind, the film was going to be about Roy, maybe 90%, 10% her. And in my mind, it started at 50-50.
Yeah, and actually one of my favorite moments, and it was nice to see this end part again. I saw the last maybe 15 minutes, but one of my favorite scenes is when she's sitting with Roy's sisters and they give her his things, and they say that they're not important to them, but I think to her, objects are so important. And I realized that, the two sisters and Martina deal with their brother's deaths in very different ways, but clearly they need each other to get through this. And I think that's more a comment than anything, but I would like for you to maybe elaborate on how you were able to gain her trust so much. I think that it felt like we were in the room with her so many times.
Well, we were.
Because
I was at times with a cell phone. I mean, I chose to shoot it in a certain way that we spoke about this morning on the panel. The flip side of making an independent film, and this is a fiercely independent film, self-financed, the old style credit cards, and friends, and I would sell my artwork to pay for the film. An idiocy, but I did it. And the flip side of that is you really get to know somebody, because sometimes you have a lot of equipment and no money. Sometimes you have money and no equipment. But over the course of 3 or 4 years, I think Martina really saw that I was committed to making a film, and a truthful film, an emotionally true film that wouldn't pull punches. And she's very careful and very formidable. And I don't want to diminish her agency in any way. She's a very smart, capable woman, which I completely respected. And I said, Martina, I'd like to shoot in your house. I'd really like to film in your house. She said, yeah, we can do that. That took 1.5 years to get access to her house. And I think that the moment Martina really began to trust me was when we realized we had something in common, which is she's an insomniac. I'm an insomniac. And it turns out that the woman who shot the film, whose name is Lisa Rinsler, who's a rock star. She shot Trees Lounge and Menace to Society and Pollock, and she shoots for Scorsese. I never would have got her if this wasn't a nighttime film. She's an insomniac. We would start shooting at midnight, and the rest of the crew hated us, but me, Martina, and Lisa were in heaven.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions for David?
Martina today? How is she?
Martina today is, knowing her and having become friends with her, obviously you can see through the film, I don't want to sugarcoat the truth because she would be pissed at me. She's struggling for an independent life, and she's in a rehabilitation center, in a brain trauma rehabilitation center, and we all hope her friends, some of whom are here, I want to just acknowledge Rodney, I'm not sure where you are, but there you are. we're all rooting for her and pulling for her and visiting her, and but she's struggling to get back on her feet, literally and physically, and we'll see what happens. We all wish for the best.
Was the person that they found possibly guilty of her brother's murder ever brought back or investigated again?
Well, I would suggest that I think the film probably would have gone in a different way, and life would have gone in a different way had not she had a stroke. I think she probably would have pursued that, but I think once she had a stroke, I mean, that just seemed moot in comparison. I think she did the journey that she needed to do to try and make peace with what happened. And this is a documentary, unlike fiction, which sometimes wraps things up in a neat bow. There's not one here. That said, I do think there is one, because I think that Martina really believes, truly believes, Roy is a great American artist. And I think because of her and other people in the film, a lot of people are starting to become aware of his work. And one thing that what I see in his work now is very interesting. I find it remarkably prescient with what's going on today. He documented police malfeasance and just this real incredible cycle of American violence that unfortunately is still here and very present and is very much in our headlines, and sadly. And so I think in her big project, which is to bring attention to his work, she's doing that.
I mean, film is a medium about the reveal and about revealing, and I think this film in particular is about that. And I'm curious, sort of, what did you learn about revealing or the reveal in this process?
Well, that's a really good question, Sandy. Thanks. I think that the thing that I learned is when to be complicit with an audience, when to be ahead of the audience, when to be behind the audience, when can somebody in the film stand in for the audience. When Faye, in that kind of amazing scene that I really felt privileged to photograph, when Faye says, "Enough about your collection already. What do you want? What are you doing? What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing with my brother? What is driving your passion?" She said it a lot cleaner than that, but that was a moment that I think everybody in the audience, at least I did, felt like, "Come on already, tell us what's going on. What don't you see? We're ahead of." We knew what she was seeing, and I think I would suggest there's a lot of symmetry and transference in the reveal. Sometimes when you're looking at Roy, or sometimes when you're looking at Martina, she's thinking about the other, or we're thinking about the other. And ultimately, there's a lot of symmetry that goes across race and class and time. And in the gap between the two narratives, I think, is where the film lives and where the reveals happen. And sometimes it's the kind of film where I trust you to do some work too and think on it too. And I think there'll be more things revealed. Every time I see it, I see something new. So I hope it's that way.
I noticed that Roy's family is front and center in the film, but Martina's isn't. Why?
I wanted to respect what Martina and her family wanted or didn't want. And let me put it this way. I did film some of her family, and I ended up taking it out of the film because I thought it was a stronger film for it. And they were very hesitant to talk, and Martina asked me not to talk to her brother and not to talk to her sister. So I respected that, but I did talk to her mother, and her mother ultimately said, "I'm not sure how I feel about being in the film. It's painful." And I think there's one shot or two shots of her in the film, which I think is very beautiful for Martina because she hadn't seen her mother for a long time. Unfortunately, it took a stroke for them to reconcile to some extent. But her mother is there wiping her tear, holding her hand. And, sometimes I'm going to let a picture speak to 1,000 words. And I think you find the form for the film, and that was the form that I wanted to find and found.